My daughter stopped me outside the hotel ballroom and looked at the walnut ring box in my hand as if I had carried a toolbox into the wrong building. "Dad, I thought I made myself clear," Melissa whispered. "You can't come in there looking like this. Owen's family is already asking questions. I don't want to spend my wedding explaining you to people." I had driven 40 miles only to give her something her mother had asked me to save for that day. I could have reminded Melissa that I had paid most of the deposits she could not cover. I could have asked what, exactly, needed, explaining about a clean suit and a 72-year-old father. Instead, I closed my hand around the box and turned toward the elevators. That was when the groom's father stepped through the ballroom doors, stared at me for 3 long seconds, and said, "Sam Carter, you're the man who saved my father's staircase." Melissa's expression changed, but not as much as it did when he asked why she had promised him my barn. "My name is Samuel Carter, though nearly everyone has called me Sam since I was old enough to carry a board without dragging one end through the dirt. I lived outside Ligonier, Pennsylvania, on 18 acres of uneven ground that my wife, Ruth, and I bought when Melissa was 8 years old. The farmhouse leaned slightly east when we first saw it. The porch dipped near the steps, the pipes knocked all winter, and the barn had 3 broken windows and a roof patched with more hope than shingles. Ruth stood in the kitchen while rain came through a crack above the sink. She looked around and said, "It has good bones." That was how she judged buildings and people. I spent 46 years as a union carpenter, most of them restoring old hotels, churches, courthouses, and houses built before square corners became an expectation. I was never an architect, and I was never a wealthy contractor. I was the man people called after someone important had already decided an old feature was too damaged to save. The farmhouse took Ruth and me 9 years. The barn took 23. Ruth kept a cloth-bound ledger of every repair. She taped receipts into it, drew small maps of drainage lines, and wrote the date beside every tree we planted. When I replaced one of the barn's chestnut posts, she recorded where the reclaimed timber came from. When we repaired the farmhouse stairs, she saved several walnut pieces that were too sound to burn and too small to reuse. Melissa grew up among extension cords, coffee cans filled with bent nails, and the smell of cut oak. At 10, she used to sit on my workshop floor and sort screws into jars. At 13, she wanted a bedroom that did not have one unfinished wall. At 16, she stopped inviting friends home because our road was gravel, and one of them had called the barn creepy. I understood some of that. Children often spend years trying to get away from the life their parents worked to give them. Ruth believed Melissa would see it differently when she got older. "She'll understand one day," she used to say. By the time our daughter was 37, I had begun wondering how old Ruth had meant. Melissa was intelligent, ambitious, and always aware of how a room looked from the doorway. She became an interior design consultant, then built a small online business, helping restaurants and rental properties photograph better than they appeared in person. She was good at presentation. She was less skilled at limits. Her first marriage ended after 4 years. I paid 6 months of her rent while she rebuilt her business. When a partner left her with unpaid vendors, I covered the most urgent invoices. Ruth and I had already paid most of her college costs, but I later helped with the balance of her student loan too. I did not keep a ledger for any of that. That was my mistake, though not for the reason people might think. I did not need receipts to prove that I had helped my daughter. I needed boundaries to show that help had an end. Instead, every rescue made the next one feel ordinary. Then Melissa met Owen Hale. Owen was 39 and worked in commercial real estate. He wore expensive watches, kept his fingernails perfect, and aligned every paper with the edge of the table before discussing money. He was never openly disrespectful to me. He simply behaved as though anything I said about land, permits, or buildings belonged to an older, slower version of the world. The first time he saw the barn, he walked around it with his phone held up for photographs. "This place has tremendous potential," he said. "It already became what I wanted it to become," I answered. He smiled politely and moved on. His father, Martin Hale, owned several boutique hotels and event properties across western Pennsylvania. I knew the Hale name, but I had not connected Martin to a young man I had met many years earlier on a restoration job. The wedding was planned for late September at the Bellwether Hotel outside Pittsburgh. It was a grand old place with white stone columns, brass doors, and a curved staircase that rose from the lobby like a ribbon. I knew that staircase better than most people knew their own kitchens. Melissa told me the wedding would be modest. Then she asked me for $22,000. She said the money would cover deposits that she and Owen would repay after the wedding. I asked why Owen's family was not paying more. "His father is investing in our future," she said. "I don't want him paying for everything too." I should have asked what she meant by our future. Instead, I transferred $12,000. Later, I sold 2 specialized planers and an old mortising machine to give her another 8. I kept the final 2,000 because, for once, something in me refused to move. The mortising machine had helped me rebuild sections of the Bellwether staircase after a fire damaged the west wing 27 years earlier. I watched it leave my workshop on another man's trailer and felt more than I expected. Melissa did not ask what I had sold. She texted, "Got it, you're the best." 2 weeks before the wedding, she came to the farmhouse on a Wednesday afternoon. My gray suit hung near the back door because I planned to take it to the cleaners. Ruth had helped me choose it for Melissa's college graduation. It was old, but it fit properly, and I had worn it only a handful of times. Melissa noticed it before she sat down. "Is that what you're wearing?" "I thought so." "Do you have anything newer?" "I have the blue jacket." "The one with the elbow patches?" "Yes." She closed her eyes for half a second. I poured coffee. Melissa turned her cup so the handle pointed one way, then another. She had done that since she was a teenager whenever she wanted to say something unpleasant without thinking of herself as unpleasant. "Dad, plans have changed a little." "What plans?" "The ceremony is going to be more formal than we expected." I gathered that from the invitation. She glanced toward the window. "You know Uncle David is comfortable speaking in front of people." David was Ruth's older brother. He had sold insurance for 30 years, owned 3 tuxedos, and had not called me since Ruth's funeral unless he needed the name of a contractor. "What does David have to do with it?" I asked. "He offered to walk me down the aisle." For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood. "I'm your father." "I know." "Then why would David walk you?" Her voice dropped. "Because Owen's family lives in a different world, Dad. There will be investors there, hotel owners, people from his company. I don't want to spend my wedding explaining you to people." I set my cup down carefully. "Explaining what?" She looked toward the suit. "Your lifestyle, the farm, the way you talk about work. You can be uncomfortable at formal events. I have worked inside half the formal buildings those people use." "That's not what I mean." "No," I said, "it isn't." She reached across the table and picked up the cream-colored place card with my name printed in gold. "The guest list is already crowded. You could come to the family brunch the next morning. It would be quieter." On the counter sat a walnut ring box I had spent 3 months making. Ruth had asked me years earlier to use one of the saved staircase pieces if Melissa ever married again. I lined the box with blue velvet from Ruth's old sewing case and fitted it with 2 small brass hinges. Melissa glanced at it. "Are you repairing something?" I was finishing something. She did not ask what. Instead, she reached into her purse and placed a folder on the table. "There are a few papers Owen needs you to sign. Nothing urgent. Just some estate planning language so everyone understands what happens with the property later." I rested one hand on the folder. "Who prepared them?" "Owen's office." "Is Owen my lawyer now?" She sighed. "Dad, please don't make everything difficult. People try to help you, and you turn it into an argument." I did not open the folder while she was there. Melissa stood, smoothed her dress, and kissed the air beside my cheek. "Think about the brunch," she said. "It might be better for everyone." After she drove away, I stayed at the table until the coffee went cold. I had known physical pain. I had broken fingers, torn a shoulder, and once put a nail through the side of my boot. An injury tells you where it hurts. What Melissa had said moved around. It was in the suit Ruth had chosen. It was in the place card Melissa took from the table. It was in the walnut box she had mistaken for another repair. Mostly, it was in the thought of Ruth not being there to hear our daughter say it. That evening, I opened the folder. The first page was titled Family Property Transition Summary. It described a future transfer of my farmhouse, barn, and surrounding acreage into a company that did not yet exist. Near the bottom, it said I intended to contribute the property for family commercial development and intergenerational wealth creation. I read that sentence twice. Then I found a brochure behind it. Across the front was an aerial photograph of my barn. Carter Hollow Events. Historic character. Modern luxury. Inside were drawings of guest cottages, a paved parking area, a commercial kitchen, and a glass addition attached to the east wall of the barn. Melissa and Owen were listed as founders. The property was described as family-owned land scheduled for transfer following the founders' marriage. The drawings were polished. Whoever made them understood how to sell an image. They did not understand the land. The parking area crossed the septic reserve. 2 cottages sat above an old spring line. The glass addition would require removing the chestnut wall. Ruth and I had rebuilt by hand. More important, no one had asked me. The next morning, I called Elaine Porter, the attorney who had handled Ruth's estate. Elaine was 58, wore practical shoes, and tapped her pen twice before saying something she knew a client would not like. She answered on the second ring. "Sam, I need you to read something." I drove to her office with the folder, the brochure, the original deed, and Ruth's cloth-bound ledger. Elaine read the transition summary in silence. When she reached the signature page, she tapped her pen twice. "This is not ordinary estate planning," she said. That was my impression. It would not transfer the property by itself, but it could be shown to investors, lenders, or a court as evidence that you intended to contribute the land later. Could they force me to do it? Not from this document alone, but if someone spent significant money relying on representations connected to it, you could still end up paying attorneys to defend a property you already own. I placed the brochure beside her. They may already be spending money. Elaine studied the photographs. "Did you authorize any of this?" "No." "Did you agree to commercial development?" "No." "Did you ever tell Melissa the property would be hers?" "Yes." Elaine looked up. "What exactly did you say?" "I don't remember every word." "Think." I remembered a text I had sent 2 years earlier, after Melissa complained that Owen did not believe she had any financial security. I had written, "One day, this place will all be yours. Stop worrying about the future." I showed it to Elaine. She read it and placed the phone on her desk. "This does not give her ownership," she said. "It does, however, explain why she may claim she believed a transfer was expected." "I meant after I was gone." "I understand. But you did not write that." The words sat badly with me because they were true. I had not created Melissa's deception, but I had spent years speaking as though my death were merely the delivery date for property she already owned. Elaine told me not to sign anything. She would review the deed, the recorded preservation covenant on the barn, and any materials the Hales had received. She also advised me to put my refusal in writing before more money was spent. "You need to be precise now," she said. "No vague promises, no family shorthand." That was language I understood. On a restoration job, the most expensive mistakes often began with 2 people believing they had agreed to the same thing. For the next several days, I paid attention. Melissa had posted photographs of herself and Owen in front of the barn. One caption read, "Building the future from family roots." Another thanked Martin Hale for believing in the vision. There were comments from architects, caterers, and wedding planners. I called my insurance agent and learned enough to know that any suggestion of an operating venue needed to stop. A county planner confirmed that the project shown in the brochure would require extensive review and could not open on the schedule Melissa advertised. I did not need every technical detail. I needed 4 facts. I still owned the land. I had signed nothing. The barn carried restrictions Melissa had not disclosed, and the Hales appeared to believe the project was farther along than it was. Elaine sent a short written notice to Melissa and Owen, stating that I had not authorized a transfer, commercial development, or promotional claims, suggesting my approval. Melissa did not answer. Owen did. His email said there had been a misunderstanding and that family discussions over many years supported their belief that the property would become available. Attached was a screenshot of my old text to Melissa. "One day, this place will all be yours." Seeing my own words used that way unsettled me more than I expected. For the first time, the situation was not as simple as me being right and them being wrong. The property was mine, the lie was theirs, but the assumption had grown in soil I had helped prepare. I still planned to leave the ring box for Melissa at the hotel. That decision had less to do with forgiveness than with Ruth. The box had begun as a promise to my wife, and I did not want anger to make every decision for me. So on the afternoon of the rehearsal, I put on the gray suit, polished my old leather shoes, and drove 40 miles to the Bellwether. The hotel lobby was crowded with flowers, garment bags, and guests who already seemed to know where they belonged. A young employee directed me toward the ballroom corridor. Melissa saw me before I reached the doors. She wore a cream rehearsal dress and Ruth's pearl earrings. The earrings stopped me more effectively than her raised hand. "Dad, you can't be here." "I'm not staying. I brought you something." She glanced at the box, then at my suit. I thought I made myself clear. Owen's family is already asking questions. I don't want to spend my wedding explaining you to people. I held the box out. "This was partly your mother's." Melissa did not take it. The ballroom doors opened behind her. A tall man with silver hair stepped into the corridor. His walk carried a slight hitch. I remembered from a scaffold accident decades earlier. He looked at me for 3 seconds. "Sam Carter?" Then I recognized Martin Hale. He crossed the corridor and shook my hand with both of his. "You're the man who saved my father's staircase." "I repaired it." "You refused to replace it when the insurance people wanted a modern one. You told my father he built something worth saving." He repeated that line for years. Melissa's face went still. Martin looked from her to me. "You two know each other?" "He's my father," she said. "Your father?" "Yes." Martin's surprise turned into confusion. "I was told your father couldn't attend." Melissa answered too quickly. "He has good days and bad days. Large events can confuse him." Martin looked directly at me. "Are you confused, Sam?" "No." Owen appeared in the doorway and immediately straightened the cuffs of his shirt. "Mr. Carter, we weren't expecting you." Martin turned to him. "You said the property transfer was a family formality." Owen aligned the rehearsal schedule he was holding against his palm. "Melissa has always understood the land would become hers." "That is not what I asked," Martin said. "Has Sam signed anything?" Owen looked at me. He had a chance to answer plainly. "No signature yet," he said, "but there has never been any doubt about his intention. That was his choice. Not Melissa's pressure, not legal language, his own answer." I handed him the unsigned folder. "There is doubt now," Melissa whispered. "Dad, this is not the place." "You're right." I closed my hand around the walnut box and walked away. My hands began shaking only after the elevator doors closed. Self-control is often mistaken for peace. It is not the same thing. Sometimes it only means you have decided not to make your worst moment public. Martin followed me to the lobby. He apologized for failing to verify the ownership and asked whether he could send my attorney the proposal Owen and Melissa had provided. Then he told me one more thing. They said you plan to move into assisted living after the wedding. I have no such plan. His expression told me he believed me. I gave him Elaine's email address and drove home with the ring box on the passenger seat. 2 days later, Elaine called. Martin's attorney had sent the full investment proposal and the email chain behind it. The proposal valued the property at nearly $1.5 million after development. Melissa would contribute the land as her equity. Martin would provide renovation capital, and Owen would manage the project. My name appeared several times. On one page, I was described as the elderly current occupant. A later section said I would transition to an appropriate supported living community following completion of the property transfer. I flattened the page on Elaine's desk. Your legal language scheduled me for assisted living. Elaine did not correct my wording. Then she showed me the email chain. 3 weeks before the rehearsal, Martin had asked Owen directly whether I had approved the transfer. Owen replied, "Sam has not signed yet, but Melissa has always understood the property would be hers. He has never refused her anything important, and we do not expect him to stand in the way." Below that, Owen had attached my old text. "One day, this place will all be yours." That email changed the story for me. Owen had known there was no agreement. He had not misunderstood a completed transfer. He had gambled on my habit of giving in. Elaine warned me that the old text and years of family conversations could still be used to create pressure. Martin's company had spent money on early plans. The Hales had stronger claims against Owen and Melissa than against me, but nothing prevented someone from dragging the dispute out if they thought I would settle to avoid embarrassment. For the first time, I felt uncertain. A legal right is useful. So is the money and patience required to defend it. I drove home thinking about the machines I had sold, the wedding money, and the promise I had written too casually. Maybe the easiest path was to keep the farmhouse and give them the barn. That thought lasted until I opened Ruth's ledger. Near the back, I found a page she had written after Melissa's first divorce. At the time, Melissa had wanted us to sell part of the acreage so she could buy a condominium. Ruth had written, "Melissa is hurting, and Sam wants to fix it. He forgets that fixing every problem can keep a person from learning what her own choices cost." Below it, she had added, "Let her inherit our love. The land should go only to someone willing to care for it." The note was not a command, and it was not a legal document. It reminded me that Ruth had seen my weakness clearly. I called it generosity. Sometimes it was fear of being the person who said no. The next morning, I told Elaine to prepare a revocable trust. I would remain in control for life. Melissa would no longer serve as successor trustee. I also asked Elaine to send a second, more precise notice. It stated that my old text referred to a possible inheritance, not a lifetime transfer, and that no person or company had authority to represent otherwise. Then Melissa called. Her first question was not whether I was all right after the rehearsal. "Why are lawyers contacting everyone?" "Because you used my property in an investment proposal. It was preliminary. You described me as an occupant. That was Owen's attorney. You planned where I would live. No one planned anything. We were trying to make the project complete. Complete without asking me." She began crying. She said Martin was furious. Owen's reputation was damaged, and the disagreement could affect her marriage. Then she said, "You told me the farm would be mine." "I did." She became quiet. "I meant after my death," I continued. "I should have said that plainly. I should not have made promises every time you were afraid about money. So this is partly your fault. My vague words were my mistake. Your proposal was your decision. That is convenient. No, it is accurate." I heard her breathing. "You're going to ruin everything because I made one mistake. This is not about the wedding anymore." "Of course it is. You're angry," I asked Uncle David to walk me. I was hurt, but hurt did not write that proposal. She ended the call. A week later, Owen came to the farmhouse without her. He arrived in a rented sport utility vehicle because he said the road was rough on his car. In the kitchen, he placed his phone face down and aligned it with the edge of the table. "I want to find a reasonable solution," he said. "What would that be?" "You keep the farmhouse and 5 acres. The business receives the barn and the remaining land. You would also receive a percentage of future profits. From a business that does not exist. It will exist if the land is secured. I am not donating my home to a business that began with a lie." His jaw tightened. "No one lied. You told Martin there was no doubt about my intention. You sent Melissa a written promise. I sent my daughter reassurance. You turned it into investment material." He leaned forward. "Sam, you cannot manage this property forever." "That is true." His expression changed, as if he thought he had finally found the loose board. I continued, "But you will not decide what happens when I cannot." He stood and straightened the papers he had brought, though I had not touched them. "You may not get another chance to protect Melissa's future. I have spent 37 years protecting it. I opened the kitchen door. She can begin protecting it herself." After he left, I did something I should have done years earlier. I removed Melissa's access to my account information and insurance files. I changed the old documents that named her as my financial agent. I did not do it in anger. I did it because trust and love had stopped, meaning the same thing. The barn needed a future, though. I did not want my answer to Melissa to become nothing more than a locked door. For several years, a vocational instructor named Calvin Moore had asked whether I would allow apprentices to use part of the workshop. His program trained young adults who had struggled in ordinary classrooms but worked well with their hands. I had always said the insurance was too complicated. This time, I called him. Calvin arrived carrying a travel mug with both hands. He walked through the barn slowly and asked practical questions about exits, wiring, tool storage, and supervision. "We don't need the whole place," he said. "The South Bay, 2 afternoons a week, and someone willing to teach them why old work matters." I'm retired. That was not my question. Nothing happened overnight. The county inspected the electrical system. I added emergency lighting and improved one exit. Elaine helped draft a modest lease that made the program responsible for insurance and supervision. Every step began with someone asking permission. Before I signed the lease, I gave Melissa one final chance to be honest with me. We met at a diner halfway between Pittsburgh and the farm. She arrived 20 minutes late, wearing sunglasses, although it was raining. For a few minutes, we discussed the wedding. Uncle David had walked her down the aisle. She said the ceremony had been beautiful. "I'm glad it went well," I told her. She removed her glasses. "You could have been there. I was told not to come. You could have tried harder." I studied her face. That was how Melissa handled boundaries. If I crossed one, I embarrassed her. If I respected it, I abandoned her. "I did come," I said. "You sent me away." She folded her napkin into a narrow strip. I asked 3 questions. "Did you tell Martin I had agreed to transfer the property?" She looked down. "I told him you intended it to be mine." "That is not the question." "Yes," she said. "Did you approve the sentence about assisted living?" Owen said investors needed to understand the long-term plan. "Did you believe I had agreed to move?" She looked toward the window. "Not yet." My last question was the one that mattered. "If Martin had not recognized me, when were you going to ask for my signature?" Melissa did not answer. I waited. Finally, she said, "After the wedding, when everything was calmer." And if I said no, her eyes filled. "You never do." There it was. Not a legal argument, not a misunderstanding. The habit beneath all of it. I told her the property would not be transferred, that she would no longer control my affairs if I became ill, and that the barn would be used for an apprenticeship program. "You are choosing strangers over your daughter," she said. "I am choosing what happens to my property while I am still here." She stood so quickly that her chair struck the table behind her. "You are doing this to punish me." "No, punishment would be trying to hurt you. I am stopping you from benefiting from a decision I never made." She left without finishing her coffee. The final meeting took place 12 days later at Martin Hale's attorney's office. Melissa believed it was a last chance to save the investment. Owen brought a revised proposal. Martin attended with his attorney. I came with Elaine, Ruth's ledger, and the walnut ring box. Owen began by saying everyone wanted the same thing: family stability, preservation of the barn, and a fair transition. He slid the revised proposal toward me and aligned its bottom edge with the table. Under the new terms, I would keep the farmhouse and 5 acres for life. The barn and the rest of the land would transfer immediately to the company. I did not open it. Elaine placed 3 items in front of Martin's attorney. The first was the current deed, still in my name alone. The second was my written declaration that I had never authorized the proposed transfer, business, or commercial use of the property's identity. The third was the signed trust and lease summary, showing that the barn now had a protected use under my control. 3 facts. I owned it. I had never approved their plan, and the property now had a future that did not include their venue. Martin's attorney asked whether any option contract, deed, contribution agreement, or written authorization existed. Elaine answered no. He asked whether my old text promised a lifetime transfer. No, Elaine said. It expressed a possible future inheritance. Mr. Carter has now clarified that intention in writing. Owen pushed back his chair. This is retaliation. I looked at him. Retaliation would have been disrupting the wedding. This is ownership. Melissa turned toward Martin. You said you believed in our vision. I believed you controlled the site, he said. We would have. No, I said. You expected me to give in. Martin opened the email chain his attorney had printed. He read Owen's sentence aloud. He has never refused her anything important, and we do not expect him to stand in the way. Then he looked at Owen. You knew he had not agreed. Owen's voice tightened. We believe the family history made his intention clear. You were asked whether he had signed, Martin said. You answered a different question. Owen had no response. Martin's attorney explained that the investment conditions could not be satisfied and that Martin was withdrawing the offer. Preliminary expenses would be handled under the agreements Owen and Melissa had signed. There was no dramatic threat and no instant lawsuit. The project simply had no land. Without the land, there was nothing to invest in. Melissa stared at me. What did you do? I made a decision. You changed the will? I changed who controls the property if I cannot. You disinherited me? What you may receive later will be decided later. You no longer have permission to plan around my death. Her eyes moved to the walnut box. What is that? I rested my hand on the lid. Something your mother asked me to make for the day you married. Melissa's face changed. For the first time since the meeting began, no one spoke. She looked at the box, then at me. Why didn't you give it to me? I tried. I did not open it. I did not explain the walnut or the blue velvet. She understood enough. Owen stood. What would it take for you to reconsider? Nothing. Melissa's sadness hardened into anger. You are choosing a barn over your family. I shook my head. You chose the barn when you promised it to strangers. She left the room. Owen followed. Martin remained seated. I'm sorry, Sam, he said. So am I. I should have verified ownership before allowing this to go so far. Yes. He accepted that. Then he asked whether Calvin's program needed donated tools. It was the first useful question anyone connected to the wedding had asked about the barn. The consequences unfolded over the next several months. Carter Hollow events disappeared from the internet. The architectural renderings were removed, along with language suggesting that the property was available or that I endorsed the project. Martin recovered part of his preliminary spending through the agreements he had with Owen and Melissa. I stopped covering their optional expenses. I did not demand repayment for every gift I had made over the years. But the $8,000 Melissa had called a temporary wedding loan became a real loan, with a written payment schedule. Her first 2 payments were late. The third arrived on time. The apprenticeship program began in March. 6 young people stood in the South Bay wearing safety glasses and trying not to look nervous. Calvin introduced me as Mr. Carter. I told them to call me Sam. One young man touched a repaired chestnut post and asked how old it was. "Older than all of us put together," I said. He smiled and asked how we had saved it. That afternoon, the barn filled with hammers, questions, and the steady scrape of planes against wood. It sounded like work again. Melissa wrote to me in May. Her letter was 4 pages long. The first defended what she had done. The second blamed Owen. The third apologized. The fourth was honest. She wrote that she had spent most of her adult life trying to prove she had not come from anything ordinary. She thought Owen's family would respect her more if the land, the barn, and the future business appeared to be hers. Then she wrote, "I used everything you built to make myself look important, and I hid the person who built it." I believed that sentence. I called her, but I did not restore the old arrangement. We agreed to meet for coffee once a month. No requests for money. No discussions about the trust. No unannounced visits to the farm. Some meetings were awkward. A few were better. An apology was a beginning, not a key. The walnut ring box remained on a shelf in my workshop until late summer. Melissa's stepdaughter, Sophie, visited one Saturday with her. Sophie had always liked the barn. She asked questions and waited for the answers. She noticed the box. "Did you make that?" "Yes." "Can I see it?" I handed it to her. She opened the lid and touched the blue velvet with one finger. "It's beautiful." I told her the wood had come from the farmhouse staircase and the lining had belonged to Ruth. "Who was it for?" she asked. I looked across the workshop at Melissa. She had heard the question. "It was made for a wedding," I said, "but you can keep it safe for now." Sophie looked at her mother before taking it. Melissa nodded. That small gesture did not repair everything. It was not supposed to. On Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, I now sit outside the barn with a cup of coffee, while young people learn to measure twice, ask before changing old work, and repair what can still be saved. The building is no longer silent. The land is protected. My daughter and I are learning to speak without money or property standing between us. And I am still here. I could forgive the shame someday. I could not reward the lie. Would you have protected the land the same way? Share your thoughts and subscribe to Wise Dad Stories.